Okay, let's turn to our general consent calendar then. And do we have any motions related to the consent calendar?
Chair, I would like to
Making
pull
sure I've
two
got
items.
Member Klein.
I would like to pull 4.1 and 4.3. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having trouble scrolling. So action item 4.1 is the instructional materials fall 2022 report, correct? And action item 4.3 is contracts, agreements for approval. There are a number of contracts in 4.3. Are you interested in pulling all or some?
So all of them.
Okay.
Well, hang on a second, I'll tell you. Yes, all of them.
Okay. All right, so action item number 4.1 has been pulled. That's instructional materials fall 2022 review report. Any discussion to that item? I'm sorry, Member Vice Chair.
No, we just can move the rest of the
We can
items.
move the others or we can address these first, right? Oh, I'm sorry, we need minutes first. Thank you. Do we have, let's see. I think we can do these in any order. Number 2, 4, and 5 have not been pulled, but I think we can address those that have been pulled and come back, or we can, right? Okay. Let's.
I'd like to make
do
a
you have
motion.
Okay.
Yeah, that we approve the minutes from the meetings listed under action item number 2.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, and action item number 2. With that, we can discuss action item number 1 that's been pulled. Member Klein, did you want to speak to that item?
Yes. In looking through the recommendations from our Instructional Materials Review Committee on curriculums that should be approved or that they are recommending as primary or secondary sources, I have found many that come from curriculum companies that have open statements on their websites committing to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and many other education philosophies and pedagogies that I am in opposition to. And so I will not be voting in support of their recommendations.
Thank you, Member Klein. Any further discussion, action, or excuse me, agenda item 4.1? Member Hymas.
Thank you. I actually want to follow up from some comments I made last year regarding this process. The notes last year were awful. I guess that's not very kind, but not very mean as well, just an observation. This year they were much more detailed, so I appreciate the work that has gone into this. I read through a lot of these notes that were taken. I've asked questions of a couple of our staff members. So I'm supportive of what I have seen through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hymas. Member Davis?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that there's a clarity for the public that this instructional materials commission is funded by the legislature, I believe, and they review materials for alignment with standards and with law and provide notes, and it's a resource to LEAs. It does not absolve LEAs of their legal responsibility to vet curriculum. Now, one might say, well, tiny LEAs might not have the time, so they'll just take the notes that are here and go with whatever they find here. And I would say that is not what they're supposed to do. They need to vet their curriculum, and the reason that we provide this support is because you've got publishing companies all over the world, and you know, you have to sometimes pick and choose pieces that fit with our laws and our community standards and leave others that don't. And this is one step closer to helping them figure out those pieces.
Thank you, Member Davis. Member Lear and then Vice Chair Earl.
Thank you, Chair. I've watched this commission for a long time, many years, when I worked at the State Office of Education, and then the many years I've been on the board, and I would agree with Member Hymas that their process has continuously improved. I also would say that these are working professionals who review these materials. So I was impressed as I read this that they had practical responses and they also had more philosophical responses. I also have to say the caliber of the individuals, not just that they're practitioners or that they're experienced practitioners, but that they are some of the finest. I know that Martel Menlove, a former superintendent, was on this commission as chair for about, 5 or 7 years. So they're some of the very finest, thorough, thoughtful educators that I've known, and I think the process has improved. And then I would also reinforce what Member Davis said, that these are completely optional for LEAs to choose from. They are not mandated. They just give, especially smaller LEAs, it's a resource for them to hear from practitioners who have closely reviewed materials. So I very much support the recommendations.
Thank you, Member Lear. Vice Chair Earl.
Hi. Yes, I just have a couple comments. These aren't paid positions, these are volunteer positions. I just wanted there was a clarification there. We have someone that is paid in our staff, and then just another clarification that it's a broad range of individuals, and we actually vote for those individuals to be on this committee. So it's not just practitioners. There are a number of different possible community members or whatever that could be on this committee as well. So it's something to keep in mind as we move forward and we have other people coming forward onto this. There were, I didn't get to go through very many of these, but I did look through some of them. There were some wording clarifications that I had questions on, but I definitely say if it needs to be addressed in our process, because the process itself is where they would be looking for those items. Do you know what I mean? They'd be looking down the process saying, does it meet this criteria? So if we've got to make a criteria adjustment, I think that's where we need to address that. Hopefully, and we have seen this in the past where particular entities have accommodated to what we're asking for or what we're wanting as a state, even though they are national or international companies or whatever. So I don't think it's beyond our reach to request additional insight or even to have something reevaluated. We've had that done before, and I do appreciate more analysis on these. So anyways, those are just my broad comments.
Thank you. Member Klein, did you have further comment?
Just one last comment, kind of along the same lines as what Jenny has said, that the review process takes into consideration more than just does it align with our standards. I've seen they have a rubric that they follow. One of the things on the rubric is whether or not the curriculum is biased. And I remember a comment in the review notes from one of our reviewers last year on one of the curriculums saying that a particular curriculum was biased because it didn't show diverse families, or it alluded that America was our system of government was superior, and that's what they were defining as bias, and so they rejected what I would consider good, solid curriculum because it wasn't diverse or equitable or inclusive. And so when we have companies who have made those kind of commitments, it's going to show up in all of the curriculum, which is not inclusive in or honoring the majority population in our state. And so it's creating the opposite effect. It's not, if anything, it's bias in the other direction. So, we have to be careful about, the rubric, I think, and that's being used, and maybe address that, and I would like to see that come before the board and us vote and have that discussion around the rubric that is being used. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Klein. Member Booth?
As I reviewed at some depth all the various companies that were being reviewed by this commission, I was interested that, and I was anticipating that board members would have concerns. But most of these companies would not be in business if they did not include diversion, inclusion, equity issues, because that's what most states, most organizations across the country are requiring. I would be interested in, just as we go forward with this commission and as we approve or disapprove today, understanding a little more clearly what members of this board, what they would substitute for diversity or for inclusion or for equity, knowing that in this world, in our nation, there are challenges. I look at a visit that I had to the former Soviet Union a number of years ago, and we learned a little song. Some of you heard it when you came to the luncheon for Beverly Taylor Sorensen, but I'm going to just sing to you. Sorry. Pusigda budjet sonce, pusigda budjet nieba, pusigda budjet mama, pusigda buduya. May there always be sunshine. May there always be blue skies. May there always be mama. May there always be me. The diversity that I experienced in visiting the Soviet Union, certainly in that was very clear, coming from where we come from, what freedoms we enjoyed, how precious they are, the liberty that we embrace wholeheartedly. But we saw children. They didn't speak words that we understood very many of, but they still shared the same wishes that our grandchildren, even today, would want with all their hearts. And diversity, inclusion, is something I am personally committed to finding ways to teach and provide experiences so that our children will be able to function in a sensitive and kind manner that will enhance our future success in communicating and understanding one another and living together. So I'm hopeful that we will at some point have an opportunity to discuss how we do teach critical ideas that allow students to grow in their capacity to be understanding, to be kind, to be accepting. And I've said enough, thanks.
Thank you, Member Booth. I see Member Hymus and Member Green. Can you top the singing?
No,
What-
no, I cannot.
Member Hymus, go ahead.
I move that the board approves the recommended fall 2022 instructional materials review report.
It's been moved and seconded. Member Green, I see a light, I believe, or is that Member Bogus? Is that discussion of the motion? And that's fine. Now that the motion's on, you can address the
I'll
motion.
discuss
and-
the- I'll
and so-
discuss the motion if I can, Chair.
I'm sorry, I should have got to you first. Yes, but then feel free, Member Green.
Just briefly, I did look over the bias, of course, that kind of stood out. I was impressed that they actually put material in there, right? The nature of human is to be biased, of mankind is to be biased in whatever we believe or lean towards. So to see that somebody would in fact put things in there that they consider to be biased was actually very helpful. There was one in a history book that I thought, I don't know how much I care for that, so I reached out to two history teachers, only two, I apologize, but one was in a more conservative area in Tooele, one was in West Valley, a more liberal area. And both kind of came to the same consensus that things like this, they don't necessarily drive the teacher. The school has the opportunity to select the material. You're going to find in every curriculum that comes before you something that you may or may not agree with. And so we have this come before us, and this was a recommended primary, and I thought, man, I would have bumped it down, but that's not my role. That's not my responsibility. So I look at these things that come before us. I don't think it was necessarily pumping propaganda or promoting anything like that. Like I said, I'm not really in love with it, but as a person who's over their own LEA, I wouldn't select that, right? But as a state, we have an obligation to serve all of our community members or people in our state and put this out there and allow LEAs to say, well, I like that, I don't like that, or ignore it and move on. So I am in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Member Green, did you have comment to the motion?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're dealing with also in this realm of DEI and these types of subjects is what I believe there's a couple viewpoints of which you can administer that. As of late, some recent events that we became aware of, there are measures that can be taken around DEI that subvert law, procedure, ethics, and integrity in what and how things are being delivered. I think the fear that we hear, if I were to address that from constituents that are statewide, is that we're approaching DEI not as a deviant behavior, going behind parents' backs, creating a divide, creating conflict, creating mistrust in those that we have placed trust to our children. And I fear that of recent events, this might be more common because of the nature of a new area that we haven't formally labeled specifically to DEI. So I think it's a fair conversation to have around what types of curriculum we are approving. And I think it's fair that we stop and question is what we are recommending as a state. I know LEAs can do whatever they want, but as representatives, we say it all the time, we set the standard. I know Superintendent Dixon today, I'm gonna watch that documentary for sure, and I wrote down all of those points. We have obligations for high quality instruction. We have high obligations to pick the best, which requires us to go through a very appropriate vetting process where we understand both sides of the conversation. If we're not addressing the real concerns that boundaries are being broken deliberately because at the end of the day, fire me, then we are setting up a system that will will discredit our very efforts. So I would be interested in getting to know the rubric. I would like to even have, and I don't know how this happens, but to have the conversation about what we are dealing with. If there are lines that get crossed, can we recognize what those are? And if they are crossed, that there's accountability. And I think that that accountability starts with us. So what I'm saying is, long way around, if we are passing and approving curriculum that creates an environment that encourages protection to deviant behavior that subverts parental rights and quality instruction, I do not support that. And I think it requires, because of the environment we find ourselves, the genuine desire to acknowledge diverse populations, equality for all, and the inclusion of individuals as they stand, children of an almighty, however you want to put that, or citizens of Utah, that we can find that and proceed in our best light. And I do believe that that comes through an understanding of what quality looks like, and then accepting accountability to making those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Green. Member Davis.
Oh, just want to add one more time really quickly. We do not pass nor approve curriculum here, except in very narrow places as directed in code. Just don't want confusion to be out there in the public. Just with the words pass and approve curriculum, we don't do that. We're receiving these, we're receiving this report from the Instructional Materials Commission, but we do not pass nor approve curriculum, only standards.
Thank you, Member Davis. Vice Chair Earl.
Well, that is true. You either vote for or against. So there, in essence, we are saying, yes, we approve this, and we are for this, or we're not. It's just, otherwise we wouldn't be taking an action on it. It would just be information.
So the motion before the board, and this just clarifies a little bit to some of the questions about, our role. The motion is that the board approves the recommended fall 2022 instructional materials review report. So that kind of outlines what we're doing in this particular space. Member Davis?
That is correct. We review and approve the report, but we are not approving curriculum. It's a report of where it aligns, where it doesn't. These are my notes. Here's my information. Take it, figure it out, local level folks.
All right, thank you for that discussion. I think that language is reflected, so it is an approval of recommended report. So with that, if there are no further comments, the motion before the body is that the board approves the recommended fall 2022 instructional materials review report. All in favor, if you could raise your hands. Sorry, we have, did you get the yeses and nos? Okay. Okay, that motion passes. Returning to consent calendar, we also had item number 3 that's pulled, and I'll request a motion to get us started here. I probably should have done that before, but is there a motion to kick us off on review of this item that's been pulled? Member Klein?
Can I speak to it?
Yeah, if you could state the motion, then speak to it.
I don't have it in front of me. Let's see. Somebody else can make the motion.
Action number 1.3, for which there were 4 specific contracts in that item.
You want me to make that motion, Jim?
Anybody's free to bring the motion?
I move that
Member
the board approves the motion under 4.3 to approve all of the contracts listed.
Is there a second to that motion? Second. Member Lair, if you'd like to speak to it, and then we want to make sure we come to Member Klein to address it, as you're the one who pulled it.
I feel like this is an appropriate comment for Groundhog Day. We have had this discussion many times. These contracts come about through RFPs. The RFP process that is carried out by the state and our specialists here is rigorous. It is to some extent repetitive. They know how to do their jobs. These contracts are carefully reviewed by many professionals, and I think that we are doing the staff's work to pick at them and continually question their legitimacy. We maybe don't like them, but some of them are based on federal requirements, and or maybe personally are not in love with the subject matter, but they're based on sometimes federal requirements. And they're well reviewed again by the staff. So I feel like yes, we should review them, but I feel comfortable approving them and not redoing the staff's work.
Thank you, Member Lair. Member Klein?
Yes, I would oppose Ed Connective, Pearson, and Cambium on the grounds that they have also come out publicly and made commitment statements to DEI, which means that all of these ideologies will filter in through their curriculums, and I am opposed to that kind of content being in our curriculum. I also oppose Kids Read Now, the contract for $4.5 million, so that our kids can have books sent to their homes, and so they can have the privilege of reading a book with their parent. This has historically been an activity that has been done for free without regulation or government intrusion into that process. Now it's a company that is asking for massive amounts of data from both parents and children, phone numbers from both, addresses, email addresses. It allows the company to text the child. It gives a form of questions that the parent needs to go through with their child. So it's obligating parents and then making parents report back through an app and collecting data on the experience between the parent and child. And I think this is highly inappropriate. Not to mention the cost, and not to mention the fact that we already pay through our taxes. I don't even know how much, but I'm sure it's an awful lot for our public libraries, for our school libraries, for classroom libraries that have all of these same books. And guess what? You can even go on on the public library's website and order a book and have it shipped to you for really cheap. And we shouldn't be subsidizing a program like this that is so intrusive into the family. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Klein. I had,
I just wondered,
Turn on your.
yeah,
turn on
just.
your-
the initials DEI
Just a
stand
point of
for.
information for Member Klein.
Right, a
Diversity,
couple-
equity, and
both
inclusion.
Members Klein and Earl, I just wanted to, maybe we could use those words so that the public would know what we're talking about.
Yes,
So
so-
we're not burying them in our acronyms.
DEI is
All right.
another, is a euphemism for critical race theory and gender ideology and comprehensive sexuality education. It's,
Let's keep to
So-
just the point of information on the abbreviation, then keep in the order here instead of going to argument.
And just to be
We
clear-
can come back, sorry, Member
Just to be
Vice Chair
clear,
Earl.
Can I just follow up on that?
Well,
a
let me
little bit?
get you in line.
I wanted to make
Let's
sure-
get you in line, Member
All
Earl.
right.
I want to make sure we're
just
following
wanna
some
make sure.
semblance of Robert's rules. So I want to make sure I don't lose track of Robert and his rules. Okay, I think we had Member Wood first, sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to speak to the Our Kids Now. Actually, many of you, I know all of you received the same emails I did, the 5 or 6, asking us to vote no on these different things. And so I actually did spend a number of hours clicking through. I appreciated that the emails came in and had all the links in a single area that I could just click, 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 and I read through. So I was interested in this, the Kids Read Now. This is actually required by SB 127. If we read 53E-3-1004, the state board shall partner with a private business or nonprofit organization to annually provide personal home use, age-appropriate printed books or digital books with accompanying electronic reading devices to students. And if you read the contract, it says that the parent or the student will have the opportunity to select the books that they like, and the parent has the ability to provide feedback. So this is one of these areas where we are bound by the legislature to do this type of thing, and this is the RFP that's been selected.
Thank you, all right. Was Vice Chair Earl, and then I had Member Bogus, and I don't think I had Member Green anymore, right? Am I in the right order there?
Okay, I don't know if they're, Director Thronson, if you're available. I checked into this too, this last week, and asking, apparently there's a list that they put out. It's available, and I'm just wondering, my question, I actually have 2 parts to it. Number 1, is the list that's available the list that we will be using?
No, so it changes. So the list that we got from them is their current list, and so they update it for summer as new books come out, so it stays relevant. And when kids are in the program for multiple years, to be able to give different texts to the kids over time.
So it's a revolving book list, a national revolving book list?
Correct.
Right? Do we have parameters around that according to our laws? Is
So
it built into this
what do you mean
contract?
parameters?
Well, like sensitive materials as well as other,
Yes, so they
any
have
other
to follow
provisions?
all Utah code policy laws are required, so they would be reviewing those, as well as there's an LEA review, and there's a parent review before those books are received by the parent. So the parent can actually look at the books they're thinking of sending and accept or reject those books.
so just one other question, if that's okay. So when the book list is what they decide, not what we decide. In other words, what the state of Utah puts in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so
Or
they,
is
they
it-
provide a list, and then we have an LEA review committee who can say, oh, we need to drop that one. We want that one off, and then they would reduce. So right now, it's a 150 book list. And remember, this is K-3. It's pretty hard to get super racy material in K-3 books. And so just want to put that out there. This is not K-8, this is K through 3. But there is a book list that will go out that the LEAs have to review prior to that becoming the list. And then those are the books that parents will have the opportunity to say yay or nay to.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, but Member Bogus is up first, if you wouldn't mind just holding up for a minute. Member Bogus,
I have a motion to divide the question.
go for it.
I would move that we divide the question.
What would that be exactly? We have 4 items in the.
Pull them all separately,
Hold.
please.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Motion is seconded. All those in favor on the motion to divide, please raise your hand. Okay. So moving forward, my question was, the data that was mentioned. I'm sorry, the motion fails. So, right, I'm sorry. Did I not? I thought Sybil said it. She was enough. I'm sorry. Still learning the learning process here, folks. Sorry, that motion fails. So we're still on the united 4 items. Question was, with respect to data, there's a comment that student data is given to the company, the provider. Is that given at the point when the provider can reach out to families, or only after they request to be involved in receiving the materials?
You want to speak to that? So let me introduce Christine Elegante is the one who's been leading the RFP contract with purchasing, and so she's got more of the granular details. I have the high level.
Thank
so
you.
If you don't mind, I'd love to pass.
You bet.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christina.
Christine Elegante, K-3 literacy specialist. Can you repeat that question, just so I? make
Yeah,
sure
there
I
was a
have all of it?
reference to the provider of the books getting data on either children or their parents, contact information, et cetera. If that's true, do they receive that information from the LEA in order to reach out to parents and see if they want it, or only after students or parents request to be involved in the program and receive the books? If that data is being provided, when do they get it?
That data is provided by the LEAs.
For all students who are potential recipients of the material?
Yes, I think they would notify. The LEAs would work in the schools. The schools would decide whether they want to communicate directly with those parents and let them know, here's what we're offering, this is what we have. And then they would decide, are we going to share or not share? Are we going to, I'm trying to think what's the word I'm using.
Like, to be able to distribute the book?
Yeah, like the distribution process, if a parent is not comfortable with that, they're not going to force a parent to participate in that type of a program. But if the parent is going to participate, then that's when they would request for the home address and those informational pieces to be able to run the program.
So before data is shared with the provider, the school has reached out to the parent and asked them if they'd like to participate and share their data? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. It's helpful. I think I saw member Carey. Well, hold on. I'm trying to get the right order. Do we have member, let's see. I think I have member Bogus,
Just
then
point of
member Carey,
information.
and then,
I-
if it's the substantive question, let's
It's
come
just
back
a
to
point,
you,
point of
member Klein.
clarification from reading the contract. It says that
Well,
all the
okay.
contact information is shared with the company first, and then the company sends a text to the child. And at that point, they can choose to opt in or not.
I'll come
That
back
was
to
the
you, but
order.
Let me just, again, keep the order, and we can circle back. I think member Carey was up next.
Thank you.
Or was it member Bogus? It's member Bogus, then
I
Carey.
don't care what order I'm in.
I think your light was on first.
That's fine with me. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate you. I would just argue that as a person who very much so believes that freedom is dependent upon the protection of privacy, anything that delivers parent and child information to a company is something I would oppose. Regardless of how that interchange takes place, I would oppose anything that delivers contact information, specifically the contact information of children, to a corporation. Thank you.
That might be just another point of clarification. Is the data that is shared with the provider the child's or the parent's information?
It's the parents' information. We would never, there's, kindergartners with cell phones are rare. It's not what, it specifically states on this page that that includes information such as a mailing address, parent and guardian emails, cell and text phones, home phones, school, teacher, grade, and achievement scores. If a student ID is included, this can be to track the student, blah, blah, blah. So it never says student cell phone, so let's be clear about what the contract says. And this is what happens after the LEA chooses what they're going to share with the vendor. So if they contact a parent and a parent's like, no, we're good, we don't want those books, awesome, they won't be sharing that in the CSV file that's shared with the vendor. Does that help?
Are they advised that if they choose to participate, their data will be shared? The
Yes.
parents? Okay. Member Carey?
Just a quick question. If an LEA objects to a book or has an issue with a book, do we keep track of that? Like how many times an LEA has objected to a book and what book that is?
Are you specifically speaking to the book selection that will be available for the child to pick? Because the book selection narrows down. The LEA narrows it down to about, I think it was 25 to 30, 35 books for, a child, let's say in first grade, and they pick from that set of books.
Well, I'm assuming if the LEA approved the books to be on that list, they weren't found objectionable. But are there books that are submitted on the general list that the LEA says, we have an issue with these particular books, or we don't know that?
And they don't want it on the list.
Correct.
We can definitely keep track. if that's
Do we
something that the
keep
board would
track?
to
Like,
do.
have we kept track?
This is
Oh, this is
new.
brand
This is a brand-new process,
Okay.
so if that is something that the board would like, we can definitely do that.
And the same question for parents. Is there a provision that if a parent objects to a book the LEA has approved, is there a process in place where we keep track of that information?
Not at this time, so if that's something the board would like us to track, because it's parents working with LEAs, they don't generally channel that up to us, but we can make that request of the process.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, board members, for the comments, suggestions. The motion before the body is that the board approves the contracts. That's all four that were pulled. Oh, do we have a light back on? Yours went off. I'm sorry. Back to Member Davis.
It's okay, thanks. I'm just making sure, this is an optional thing that parents can choose to participate in or not participate in. And in the contract, it says that if they choose to participate, then the company will be able to contact them. But Member Klein's mentioning that she read in their company statement online that somewhere that they may contact students, but do we have provisions in our data privacy board rules and such that LEAs cannot give student information out to vendors and such? I mean, is that, do we have that covered somewhere?
Director Thronson or?
This is outside my realm. I don't do privacy. We need
They did
Katie,
verify
maybe
that.
Adam.
They did verify that part.
I know my areas of
Or
expertise.
Christina? Did you is it Christina or Christina? Sorry.
It's Christine. I was just going to comment that the data, the information that would be shared after the parent accepts to be in the program or whatever, is the information that they use when they register a student. So kind of keep that in mind. I think about my own child. When I registered my child for school, I don't have my child's cell phone included in that registration process. So that is something to think about, that it'd be, the parent is the one who would be registering. They'd be using that same data that the parent gave at registration.
Additionally, I know the contract has the typical terms and conditions that the state board has approved, so that is what we would be operating under. I can't speak specifically to
Okay,
what you're asking.
follow up. It was a general question to find out if we have protections in our data privacy, but maybe that needs to come at another time. I mean, I'm pretty confident, what I've heard, that this is optional. Parents have to opt in, and then they'll be contacted, and then they can choose which books to participate in.
Thank you, Member Davis. Member Bogus.
I just have a quick question. Is this implied consent or fully informed consent?
The intent would be for the LEAs to ask the parents for permission to be able to share that information.
With fully informed consent or implied consent?
Fully informed consent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Earl, and back to Member Carey.
So I just want a clarification. Even if a business entity, third-party provider in this case, has something on their site, would that overrule what we have in our contract with them? Or do we need to seek further clarification?
Do you mean like their book list?
Well, no, I've looked at their book list. I'm talking about the parameters of how they would engage with families. Like if they had something that was different than what we have in our contract, what would
The
we?
contract
The contract would-
drives how they do it. So they obviously operate with lots of different vendors, but the contract is how they will be providing services in Utah.
And I know we don't have our contract person here. My question is what does
Adam
that?
is here if you.
Oh, Adam, great.
It's Katie, I think, that we're missing.
Adam Hurd.
So
Thank you for coming up.
Thank you. The question has to do, once again, with the data. What is in our contracts that the third-party providers can and cannot do with personalized data?
Adam Hurd, Director of Purchasing. I would need to review our terms. As Jennifer said, our data privacy terms are largely written and reviewed and approved by our data privacy team. So they would be best to answer that, though I could review them and get back to you.
Okay, yep, I would, if we could do that quick, that'd be great. If not, I don't know if
Aaron, is that within your realm? I'm sorry, you just walked in and somebody offered you up for a potential answer. It was Vice Chair Hart.
Could you just repeat the question, because I was having a conversation.
Yeah, so the
Sorry.
question is, our third-party providers in our contracts, do they have what is their obligation with that information they've collected, that personal information? Do they have an obligation to, in other words, are they confined? Can they share it with other educational entities?
Got it.
So-
So, again, passing it back to, I'm not sure what Adam said on that. The constraints are when it goes into contract. Again, sorry, Aaron Bruff, Director of Data and Statistics, and I'm answering for Katie Chalice, who is really the best person for this, but it is limited. They cannot share that with any other educational entity unless it is within that contract and it allows it themselves. And they have to maintain it separate. And it can't commingle or
Could they use it for other purposes,
Such
You-
as, can you give me an
continuing
example?
to contact parents about additional books or additional resources they're selling? So it may not just be they're getting these
So-
4 books from this, I'm wondering about the continued.
Maybe he's going to answer this one.
Brian Quisenberry.
All right, I've got my podium.
We'll get the full team up here
It's
eventually.
all
Thank
governed
you,
by the
Brian.
contract. The contract dictates what can be shared and to whom it can be shared. It's all in the contract. They can't do anything outside the contract. If so, then they're in breach of the contract. So it all depends. We just have to look at the contract and see what it says.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you all, unless there might be a couple others. I think Member Carey, then back to Member Bogus, and then Member
Yeah, I just have a
Davis.
point of inquiry. So I'd like to make oh.
Did you have yours on? Okay.
Thank
I
you.
didn't see a light.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the Kids Read Now matter, but do we need to have a motion to divide that out from the current motion in order for me to make that motion to amend?
We had a motion to divide which failed.
But
I'm
that
not
was for
sure-
all the,
Correct, that was for all 4, so you could have a different motion to divide. And, yeah, go ahead, if that's the motion you'd like to make.
yeah, so I'll make the motion to divide.
It's in order. It's
Yeah.
in order if you'd like to make a motion that's
Thank you,
different
Chair.
from the prior order, which was going to separate all 4 of them individually.
And my motion would just be that we divide the Kids Read Now from all the other matters which have been pulled.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion of the motion to divide? I see lights, but I assume they might be for the substance of the matters, unless Member Straight?
I oppose that motion because I feel like this discussion is Groundhog Day. And we've had this discussion many, many times. We know the processes. And the processes are well documented and protected. And we need to move on, so.
Okay. Any other discussion to the motion to divide? If not, Member Green?
I think our conversation is very relevant because we are just asking clarifying questions so that we're very clear on what we're voting yes to. I do appreciate the discussion. I support dividing just so we can get some clarification, on the contract. And I do appreciate that all of you are here helping that process. So contracts are in depth. So thank you for clarifying questions.
Okay, the motion is in order. Back to Member Carey, then we'll put it to a vote.
I just want to speak to the motion. The reason I'm asking for it to be divided out is for the purpose of making a motion to amend the current contract to ask staff to pull that information from the LEAs regarding books that parents or the LEA itself may find objectionable. But if there's someone on there to address that, I'd be happy.
Well, before we go to the substance, we have to see if we're going to divide. So that motion is now on the floor. Any further discussion to the motion to divide item number, it's not numbered. Motion on the floor is to divide action item 4.3 to divide Kids Read Now contract from the other 3, which are Ed Connective, NCS Pearson, and Cambium Assessment. And I think we've addressed all that have comments on the motion to divide. So those in favor of the motion to divide, please raise your hand. That motion passes, vote of 8-7. So the items have been divided. Looking for further motions. We have now separated the first 3 from Kids Read Now. So any other motions on the floor?
I'd like to.
Member Carey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a motion.
You can direct staff.
Okay, and being so patient, but Chair.
Why don't we bring a motion first and then, well, we need to have a motion on the floor. So Katie Chalice is with us, but is there a motion, Member Carey?
I'd just like to make a motion to review the contract and add additional information or terms to it, if that would be in order.
That motion in order? So I think it is. The motion would be to direct staff to,
Add specific terms, and those specific terms being that not only the LEAs, but I guess the party to the contract be required to disclose complaints or objections it receives regarding the books it provides through this contract, and report those to USBE.
all right, the motion is on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been seconded. Discussion of that motion or questions? We now have Katie Chalice with us, our privacy director, so thank you. We need a motion to address, and it's now before the body. So questions or comments to that motion? Member Bogus, Member Lear, I apologize, but did you have a light? I don't want to interrupt unless, okay, there it is.
This goes to a part of this discussion and also some comments that were made earlier. And that is, I hesitate to prolong this discussion. On the other hand, I think we have to acknowledge this kind of querying LEAs to keep a list of books that were rejected at the local level, and then keep a list from our staff at books that we received from the LEAs is exactly what we are resisting in other areas. Not asking LEAs for more information. We can't get this information without asking them. So it's one more thing we're asking LEAs to do. One more thing we're asking our staff to do. Our understanding that this is optional and opt-in, and there are several levels of review. Is this one of the things that we, again, want to burden LEAs with? And if we do, then we need to own our own part in increasing the workload of LEAs.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Bogus, then Davis, then Carey. Let's see. Bogus, Davis, Carey. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have a question for Mr. Quisenberry.
Ryan?
So my question would be, in the privacy standards, and I did a terse review, but is FERPA the code under which the privacy standards are listed? Because that's a very broad thing, so I'm just wondering if that's in the contract.
When you say the privacy standards, what are you referring to?
Well, the data privacy, the sharing, is FERPA referenced in the contract? Because it's not very, FERPA's just not good for protecting our kids. I know they say it's protecting our kids, but I would argue that it doesn't protect our kids.
I would defer to Adam as far as whether that's in the contract. I don't have that in front of me, but I think it's standard. Okay, Katie's saying it is in there. Yes, go. All right, Katie can answer, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Katie Chalice, Director of Privacy. You bring up a good point. So FERPA is the federal standard. The state of Utah also has the Student Data Protection Act, which in some cases goes a little further than FERPA. And our standard terms and conditions that we engage in when we contract with vendors meet both of those standards. I can't speak for your personal opinions, but I think the board would find that those provisions are really tight in terms of data privacy. And I'll also mention, I'm sorry that I missed the first part of the conversation, but there is kind of a distinction between, like, our LEAs, according to this contract, are going to need to also secure a data privacy agreement with the vendor, and those also have really strong provisions. There's a national template that we use that is really good at protecting student data.
Could you describe those provisions that would be in that data protection element of the contract?
You bet, yeah. So there's FERPA protects and state law protects against redisclosing data or using data for reasons other than what the contract requires. So diverting from the original purpose is not permitted. There's also really strong security standards on following national and state level designated security standards for storing the data. And there's some, Utah in particular has an audit provision for third-party vendors that allows the LEA, if they're interested, to engage in like an audit of the provider to ensure that they're using the data appropriately. I could speak to a couple other things. Do we have any other questions?
Thank you, yes. I think, hold on, folks, let me just make sure we're following the right order here. We had, I think, next up, Member Davis.
I was, like to make an amendment to the motion that the USBE information be included when LEAs contact parents to let them know this is an option, so that parents who have any concern about the program or the books or whatnot, one, they could just not choose them for the child, but they could send information to USBE. And this is because we are working fervently in our reports and requirements task force to try to reduce the number of reports.
Member Davis, I think we need a motion and then speak to it, if you could. The amendment. You had an amendment, and I think it went into speaking to the amendment.
That's my
Could you-
amendment, and I prematurely spoke, and I'm done.
Do we have a second? Would you like to reframe just the motion itself, or the amendment, proposed amendment?
You want me to reframe it?
No, just restate it, just the motion to amend itself.
That USBE information be included when the LEAs offer the option to parents. So
USBA
they
contact
can,
information?
USBE contact information, so just the public comment information, so they can share feedback with USBE
Okay.
on the program or the book titles.
All right, so we have a proposed amendment to the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Member Lear has seconded.
And-
Discussion back to Member Davis, if there's anything further on the motion.
I'm not quite done with my amendment.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment if it does away with the vote. I don't think that counters or negates what I'm seeking.
All right, let's just pause for a second, make sure we've got the right sequence of motions and amendments teed up here. So the underlying motion was, let's see, the division passed. We had adding additional terms. That motion has a proposed amendment from Member Davis. That's now before the body. And so if Member Carey is saying that the Member Davis amendment is a friendly to the motion that's on the floor, I think we can add that to Member Carey's motion.
Point of order,
Correct?
Chair. So sorry. I have been reminded many times, there is no such thing as a friendly amendment.
Well, there is if the maker, the underlying motion accepts as a friendly. So we can't declare that it's a friendly, but the person whose motion is being attempted to amend can be, am I correct here, Sybil? Sorry, we're still mastering Robert's rules here, but there is a friendly, but I don't think it can be, it can only be addressed by the maker of the underlying motion to which it is potentially friendly. Brian, is that correct?
So there is technically no such thing as a friendly amendment. However, Robert's Rules allows if there's a unanimous agreement, then it can be amended.
So what I need to say is if that's without objection, Member Carey intends to accept as a friendly amendment. Any objection to that acceptance as a friendly? Hearing none, the amendment proposed by Member Davis will be added to Member Carey's motion as a friendly without objection. So let's pull that up if we could to the Member Carey's motion. Yeah, let's just get this in order, then we have discussion to the amended. We'll come to and Deputy Superintendent Stallings, but let's get the language up there. And we can discuss the motion as amended. Well, it was the friendly. Okay, let's see. Object to the motion. That doesn't mean it's a proper motion. Be a reason to object to it. All right, let's just see if we have the language in here that Member Carey and Member Davis are trying to put together. Then we can discuss whether the motion would work and get comment to the motion.
I want to talk to Director Chalice first, and then I'll make the motion to amend.
Do we have the combined? Okay.
Chair, if I just have a question for Director Chalice and
Sure.
staff generally. So I think Member Lear brings up a good point that, and I don't even know if we have the legal right to saddle the LEAs with an additional requirement in this particular regard, but looking at this agreement, I'm imagining that if an LEA or a parent has an objection to a particular book, they're going to contact the party to this agreement. And that party, I would assume, keeps this data. Is there any reason why we just couldn't request the data regarding books that have been objected to or complained about directly from the party that we're contracting with versus the LEA?
So Director Chalice, and then I believe Deputy Superintendent Stallings also wanted to address.
Yeah, I imagine Deputy Superintendent Stallings might have a better answer to that. In terms of, from the privacy perspective, you know, I'm just going to defer to her because I do feel like it's more of a content question than a privacy question.
Thank you.
Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
Thank you, Chair. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. The point I was going to make is directly to the point that Board Member Carey just alluded to, is generally we have to remember that these contracts are between USBE and a provider, in this case, Kids Read Now. It does not govern or it's not law for our districts and charter schools. So whatever motions we make, you'll want to make sure to make the motion about Kids Read Now and what they will have in their power and control to have Kids Read Now do. Because if you're going to say that we want to amend the contract to require LEAs to do A, B, and C, this is not going to, this does not legally govern LEAs, and that would be more applicable for a board rule, which we could do. We could bring a board rule forward regarding some of these contracts. But I just wanted to keep that background in mind to be careful about what amendments we're asking for, because we have to remember this is a contract between USBE and the vendor, not with LEAs. So if we, for example, in this case, you could say, we direct that a provision be provided that Kids Read Now requests, you know, certain information be distributed to families through the LEAs, but what practically how that's going to work, the LEAs have no notice at this point that you're asking them to engage or do something legally today. And so they are not here to say that's practically possible or feasible, and I just wanted to give you that kind of background.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Stallings. So to
I withdraw my
clarify-
motion.
Hold on, the motion's before the body. Let me just
We can't do
clarify. I think what Deputy Superintendent Stallings is saying, that the motion before the board is to approve a contract. It is not to make new rules about what LEAs must or must not do. So that's the narrow scope that we're considering. If there's some proper way to ask staff to go back and add terms to a contract, that would require discussion with the provider, correct? It's a contract negotiation. So that is the scope of what's before us, is whether we want to vote as a body to direct staff to go back to this contract and propose something different. It's a two-sided contract, so if the other side says no, and the contract is gone, right? That's the scope of our direction. We don't have plenary authority over Kids Now or anybody else except through the contract. Am I getting that right, Deputy Superintendent Stallings? Okay. So that's the scope of our decision here today. So I think, let me just make sure we're clear on what's before the body. We have Member Davis's amendment and two-member Carey's motion. Just Member Carey's motion on the floor then. Okay, further discussion to that motion. Do we have Member Green, Member Davis? Or, I'm sorry, I think that's Member Bogus. Oh, Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman. Go ahead, yes, please.
Thank you. Patty Norman, Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement. I just wanted to ask Brian Quisenberry a question, and it is in regards to HB 374 Sensitive Materials Review. Would these books fall under the Sensitive Materials Review? Therefore, there is already a process in place for parents to be able to find if there's a book that is objectionable, that they could report it to an LEA and go through that process, thus negating a different process that's outside of that purview.
Yeah, I think HB 374 applies to all materials, all that an LEA might use. Yeah, so to the extent this is a book that could be used by an LEA in an LEA setting, sure, 374 would apply.
Okay. We have, let's see, in order, Member Klein, Member Bogus, Member Reel, Member Klein.
Oh my gosh, we've been so many different directions. I don't remember what I
We
raised
have a
my hand for
motion that's
specifically.
now before the body. So did you still have a
Well,
comment to the motion?
it seems like the motion isn't relevant based on the new information.
Okay, that's a fair comment. It's in order. Any other comments to the pending motion? We've got Member Reel.
I think, were you first?
Chair, I really want to speak to the underlying motion.
Well, the motion is
Not
on
this
the floor
motion.
as Member Carey's motion. Okay, so if members have questions that are not directed to that motion, we'll come back to you. Member Reel?
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around this whole thing. So this was a request from legislation to get a contract for, literacy, and it's been vetted by the RFP process. It's passed through the assessment process. It has an assessment process, and it's been thoroughly vetted by staff. And, in my searching of this program, I did a Google search, and I find things like, in my just one basic Google search, it says, Kids Read Now makes significant impact. Kids Read Now, this is a great program that puts books in the hands of children that may not otherwise have the means to books. And you can just Google it and find all of these answers. So I guess when I look at these situations, these conversations, I think about the role, and when I filed for candidacy, I thought about the role of the State Board of Education. And it feels like conversations like this, when we're finding any opportunity to pull out and oppose topics like data or diversity or inclusivity, it feels offensive to the process and to the staff that have spent a lot of time, that we've trusted to thoroughly and thoughtfully go through this process and pick these and bring them before us. And to make sure that they're useful tools for our LEAs, I trust the staff in their process in doing that. And so I feel like if we want to have a broader discussion about data and diversity and inclusivity, it feels like this is not the appropriate times to keep bringing these up.
Thank you, Member Reel. And I'll just remind members, what we have before the body is this particular proposal about whether we direct staff to take particular terms to the contract, which would have to be agreed upon by the other party to the contract. So that's what's pending, and I think we have Member Carey and Member Davis to this motion. Do you still have the light on for this, or do you want me to
Yeah,
come back
with
to
this.
some?
Because I'm thinking, I'd just like to amend the pending motion to remove the language about requires LEAs in light of the discussion that was had from Deputy Stallings.
What that would look like?
Point of order, that would also include taking off the last sentence, which was the part that I meant, which is fine, because I was going to do the same thing anyway. So it would take off the part about LEAs giving USBE information out, and it would just leave the direction to the contract to require the reporting of the books.
Is that the intent of the motion, Member Carey?
It is.
Okay.
Chair, if I may?
All right, let's just make sure we got this framed up, and then we can back to discussion. Is that the amendment that you're proposing to your original motion, Member Carey?
It is.
All right, so that is a motion to amend. It does need a second and a vote. Is there a second on
Chair,
that
if I may?
motion? Second, or
I would
we have a
like to
question about whether there's a second?
I would second the motion and move
Okay.
to amend.
Okay, so you seconded Member Carey's motion,
Mhm.
and now you have a motion to amend. Let's just make sure we haven't run out of potential amendments. I think we have a single motion on the floor with an amendment, and now an amendment to the amendment. That's R2, so go
Okay,
ahead.
so I would
Just
just-
state the amended motion, or excuse me, state the motion to amend. We'll see if there's a second to that.
I would just move to amend at the end of that and to injunct against the release of directory information, which is broad and it's not consistent across our state.
Is this the
And
motion, or is this speaking to the motion?
The-
Let's
oh,
just
sorry,
get
I
your
apologize.
Specific language
I
for
started
the-
to speak to the motion.
All right, that's
Just,
Perfectly human. Just give us the language that would be the proposed amendment to the amendment.
okay, that's it.
See what we've got here. By directory, do you want to clarify?
So one of my
Speak to the
concerns with
motion.
FERPA, if I may speak to the motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, so one of my concerns with FERPA, an LEA's handbook, they have defined directory information as, and they don't need parental consent, informed consent, or implied consent to release directory information. Their definition of directory information is, quote, name and grade, name of parent and/or legal guardian, student address, parent address, telephone number, including the student's cell phone number, email address, student's email address, date and place of birth, dates of attendance, the image or likeness of the students in pictures, videotape, film, and/or other medium, major field of study, participation in activities, degrees, sports, awards, social media, usernames, and handles, weight and height of student, most previous school attended, certain classwork may be released. This goes on and on to include the student's ID number, and I'm not joking, this goes on for like 4 more sentences. But when we talk about opt-in, if the contract is governed by FERPA, directory information can go with or without parental consent.
All right, I got to make clear, I think we had a second to the motion, but I've been asked whether we did. We did not hear a second.
I'll second her amendment.
Second, Member Bogus's, so Member Klein has seconded Member Bogus's amendment. Any discussion to Member Bogus's proposed amendment to the underlying amendment to Member Carey's motion? We have, the question then is on the bottom here, add to the end of the motion and to enjoin the release of directory information. And you've explained what is meant by directory information. Discussion of the motion, we have Member Klein and Member Lear.
Just on the issue around the data, I serve on the Student Data Privacy Committee, and we had a really eye-opening conversation in one of our committee meetings where I asked, I said, we have all of this great language in our contracts to protect data from being shared outside of the parameters in which it is stated in the contracts. But my question was, who oversees compliance with that? How do we know that those provisions are being followed? Who monitors that? And I got blank stares.
Is that a question for Director Chalice or for member of our
Well,
staff?
it's not a question unless they have a different answer than I received that day. The answer I received was that there is no oversight, that would take an army of people working 365 days a year to try and oversee that, and that it just wasn't possible. So this is an entirely new realm that most people have never thought of, that just because we have language in a contract does not mean that anything is being monitored and that there's any oversight. And they said, well, if a parent complains to us that their child's data has been used wrong, then or incorrectly, or then they could file a complaint and we could investigate. Well, how many parents even know what kind of data is being collected or shared about their child, let alone where it's going or how it might be used incorrectly or what's in our contracts? I mean, it's insane when you think about the possibilities. And even if they don't share outside of their company, they can use it in all kinds of ways that are, I would say, are inappropriate in order to continue to push forward an agenda or to just build their business. So it's just a comment.
So it is a comment. Would you like to frame part of that
I don't know
as
if there's a
as
way
question?
to amend this to.
We have 2 amendments
I don't think there's a
pending,
way
so-
to amend.
So Member
a fix
Klein,
for
do you,
that.
Member Klein, we have an amendment and an amendment to the amendment, but did you have a question among the argument to frame for Director Chalice or anybody? Okay. Let me see. We have next Member Lear.
And I have.
And we do need to keep moving, folks.
Yes,
It's so
we do.
let's advise we're at 11:30.
Speaking to Member Bogus's explanation of FERPA, I think it's also important to add that every parent every year has the opportunity to tell, and the LEA has to provide this opportunity to parents. Every parent has the opportunity to say, I don't want my child's directory information released or publicly used in any way. So we already have the opportunity built in. One more thing that we already have LEAs doing that they are required to do under FERPA. Secondly, to the question about oversight of contracts, I think the reason you maybe got blank stares, and I'm so sorry to have left that committee, Natalie, where we could have had that interesting discussion, is that that's contract law. That's Contracts 101. If you have a contract, there is rarely, unless you build it in and you have a legion of people to follow up with those kinds of things, you have to wait for someone to breach the contract in order to have a further action against it. So it's not, it's blank stares because that's just the nature of people contracting with each other. And to have anything further is just a huge amount of work, and there is some built-in inherent trust in our experts, in our office, who write those contracts and put in as many realistic provisions as they can. And then we move on. So,
Can I
thanks.
just say, it's not our staff that I don't trust or the people that write the contracts. It's the company that the contract obligates.
Okay, Member Klein, I'm sorry, but we've got to get
and
back
is
to
left to
Robert's
police
rules here.
themselves and
All right,
report on
thank-
themselves if
Thank
there's a
you for
problem.
all of those. I think we have Member Davis and the Vice Chair Earl, and then we probably do need to move to some, did you have, I think, were you up first or Member?
Yeah,
Earl.
I had a question, I guess, about the amendment to the amendment, and what exactly we're putting in the contract about the data. Because honestly, if we had an amendment to the amendment to the amendment, I would just say, just let's end this conversation and just direct the contract to be amended so that no information is given until after a parent opts into the program. That really would help a lot of this and move the meeting forward.
Vice Chair Earl?
I make a motion that we postpone until next month or next Thursday in our board meeting at that time and get questions answered.
Is that in order? We could, when's the next when's the next board member in which, or board meeting at which this would be appropriate? Would that be March? Director Chalice, we have a potential motion on the floor that might seek to postpone this. What is the time sensitivity on this?
Director Thronson?
Hold on, they're getting there. Hold on. They're talking it through. We're looking for clarification from staff on the timeliness of a potential motion to have further discussion. Deputy Stallings.
I'm hearing that it is not time sensitive, so it could wait until March.
Okay, so the motion was back to Member Earl, Vice Chair
Yeah, I'd like
Earl.
to make a motion to postpone this till March and
Seconded by Member Carey. Any discussion of the motion to postpone this for further discussion with staff until our regularly scheduled March board meeting? Discussion of the motion, if
Just
not,
a question.
Member Wood.
So will this allow them to go back and talk to this vendor about some of these issues? I know that the contract specifically says that data information, directory information will be shared. And so will they be able to go back?
What was the nature of the specifics of the motion, Member?
Because you're just
Vice Chair
postponing
Earl?
it. What's happening in the meantime? Are we making any improvements to it? Are we helping
Was that a
it get
motion
better?
to postpone and direct staff, or what was the
what would you
specific
like the
motion?
motion to be? Direct staff, yes, that is what the motion was, is to direct staff to address the following questions.
Address the
That
concerns
we've
raised
talked
today in
about,
the board
concerns
meeting.
raised within the board meeting, so we can get those
All right.
answered for next month.
Okay, does that fit with the second that was offered, Member Carey? Is that, you're the second, is that consistent with your understanding of the motion? Okay. Any discussion on that motion? If not, the motion is to postpone action on the Kids Read Now contract until our March board meeting and direct staff to address the questions and concerns discussed during today's meeting. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? 4 opposed, I believe. All right, that motion passes. We still have 2 items. I'm sorry, we still have 3 contracts. That's correct. So the motion earlier was to divide Kids Read Now, and we still have pulled, but without motion yet, the contracts between Ed Connective, Pearson, and Cambium. So, well, we need a motion. Was there a motion on the floor to approve the other 3, Carol? Okay.
Yes, there was a motion on the
All
floor, Chair.
right, so motion before the body is to approve the other 3 contracts. Discussion to that motion. Member Bogus.
I had a question. I'm not certain
Question
to
to
whom
the-
I shall address it, but I'm wondering if this Cambium contract is in addition to, or if it is an amended contract.
Any member of our, Adam, thank you. Director Hurd. Director Hurd.
Adam Hurd, Director of Purchasing and Contracts. This is not a new contract. It is an amendment to a current contract with Cambium.
So the contract is decreased from 42 million to 40 million? Am I reading that right? I'm so sorry. Maybe I can't see it.
Cambium, no, we are adding $533,021 to that contract. So it's going from about 46,700,000 to 47,238,000.
Oh. Well, what I just learned there is that I need glasses. Thank you, sir. That was my question.
All right, any further discussion to the motion, which is to approve the 3 remaining contracts? If not, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Sorry? 3 noes? Okay, that motion passes. Okay, we still have 2 items on the consent calendar. Wait, oh, are they? Yep. Okay. You are correct. Let us move to the monthly budget. Let's take a 2-minute break, and we will return for finance with Deputy Director Jones.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.